Hey guys, what's going on? It's Broken Nose Gaming here, and like I said in my previous video, this video is going to be a PC build video. We are looking to do a sort of budget build. There is one requirement, and that requirement is the theme is supposed to be pink and white, so you will see a lot of those colors in this build. This particular build, because there's two builds. There's my build, and then this is like a secondary build that I had built. This one started off with like a i3 9100, and I can't even remember what the GPU was. I think maybe an RX 590 at one point. And then it has slowly evolved and sort of devolved. It went to a Intel 11400 and a GTX 970. And it eventually got taken apart, and I used it for a while with an RX 3060 Ti and 11600, which then the 3060 turned into a 3070. Both computers eventually got taken apart, and then I rebuilt my computer behind me. That has a Ryzen 5700X and the RTX 3070 in it. So I figured it's time to put this system back together. It's been out of commission for a while. The main goal of this system is to be a budget system. It's not going to have the highest spec parts inside of it because its use is not very high end. There's very few games that get played on it. I will still do benchmarks and things like that when we're done, but that's the kind of system we're looking at. We're not looking at like a high end, super processor, amazing graphics card. This is a entry-level / mid-range system that is more focused on the aesthetic and the budget, because those were the two things that I was told I had to follow, was the color scheme and the budget. So I'll go over the parts and what I'm gonna put together today, and then we'll watch me build it real quick, and then maybe I'll throw some benchmarks up in the end. I will share the prices for each item that I purchased, and I'm not gonna lie, I did cheat a little bit. Some of these parts are secondhand units that were in previous builds, so like technically I really didn't pay for them. Other of them I did just get straight out for free, so just to keep that in mind. But let's get started. So I think we'll start with the CPU. So for this system, I went with a Ryzen AM4 platform. AM4 is still, they're still dropping new CPUs for the AM4 platform. I went with a Ryzen 5 5500 CPU. The interesting thing about the Ryzen 5 5500 is it's technically a Ryzen 5 5600G, which is an APU. The only difference between the 5500 and the 5600G is there is no graphics on board on the 5500. They've disabled it. Downside about the 5500 is it has less L3 cache. I believe it's like 16 versus 32. So, it doesn't have, like, my 5700X I think has 32 megabytes of L3 cache, so it doesn't have as much L3 cache. But the price for this guy, I only paid $83.69 for this CPU, which sub $100 to get you a Zen 3 platform CPU. I don't think that's a bad deal. So we're starting off with a Ryzen 5500. And what is the CPU going to go in? Well, let me take a look here. I can get you a little sneak peek. It's still in a static bag. The CPU is actually already installed. Let me go ahead and I'll take it out and I'll show you the CPU. I also have images that I'll probably throw up as well, just so you can get a better look at stuff. But we're running with an ASRock B550M. And I'll tell you why I fumbled on this. It's ASRock B550M Pro SE. Pro SE is an all-white, mostly white PCB motherboard. It has an integrated I/O shield. It has two PCIe slots. One of them has metal on it. Has up to 4 RAM. It's actually pretty nice. The VRM isn't terrible. But this is kind of a weird motherboard, and I'll tell you why. This motherboard is not a B550M chipset, and I even went online because I saw some reviews before I purchased it stating like, oh, this isn't an B550, it's an A520. I can't overclock. There's no PBO. The chipset is not an A520. It is a Pro 565 chipset. So it's really strange that ASRock still calls this a B550M, but the Pro 565 does not have overclocking capabilities. So you cannot do PBO. You cannot undervolt. The only thing that's like overclockable is the RAM, which for this situation, I've again had to go with aesthetics and price over performance. For this situation, a Ryzen 5 5500, I don't think overclocking was going to make a big difference anyway. I did kind of want to keep it at a 65 watt TDP if I could. I know it maybe jumps up like 10 or 20 watts when it's using all cores, or at least my 5600X did when I had PBO disabled. So you can't overclock on this board. It has a weird chipset that's not a B550M. It does look really nice. It has an integrated I/O shield. It has decent amounts of headers and ports, and it was only $84.99, which isn't bad for a white motherboard. Most white motherboards are a lot more expensive because they're higher end motherboards. So when I saw this, I was like, hey, this is going to work perfect for my build. Snapped it up, boom, no problem. So I think the next thing we'll showcase here is the RAM. The RAM is from an older build, which is why it's a little bit slower than I wanted, but I got two 16 gigabyte DDR4 2666 Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro RAM in white. If you were to buy them today, they're like $90, which I mean is a lot, especially for such slow RAM. You can get way faster RAM. I saw a ad for, I think it was Corsair Vengeance. It was black. It was like the Asus Tough Edition, 32 gigabytes of DDR 3200, and it was like $60. So there are way better deals. I didn't pay $90 for these when I got them. I also got them on sale, and it was for a different iteration of a build, which is why it's so slow. But I don't think it's going to hurt the performance terribly, especially because of what this computer is really meant to do. Like, I'll admit, the two games that it's going to play are going to be Star Wars: The Old Republic and maybe World of Tanks Blitz. I don't think 2666 megahertz RAM is going to be a big deal. So I figured instead of buying a new set of white RAM, I just stick these back in there and call it a day. Now, this one's gonna be kind of weird because some things just happened, but we'll talk about the CPU cooler. For the CPU cooler, I was again sticking with the pink and white theme, and I actually found something really cool, and I've used this company personally. I went with a Deepcool AK400 pink limited edition CPU cooler. AK400 only has one fan and a CPU radiator tower thingy. It is pink and white themed. The heat pipes are white, the radiator is white, the fan has a pink frame with white blades, and there's pink and white on the top. And I've used the Deepcool before. I have a AK620 digital, which is way too big. I actually only use one fan on it. But I've had good luck with Deepcool. I liked their CPUs, or their CPU coolers, I'm sorry, and their prices weren't terrible either. I paid maybe like 60 or 70 bucks for my AK620 digital, and this one I only paid $40 for. The problem is, as of a few days ago, Deepcool no longer exists in the US. They got in trouble for doing something. They've been sanctioned off the face of America here. I went on Amazon to double check the specs of the CPU cooler to make sure it was the right price, and when I clicked on the Amazon link, it took me to a page that said it doesn't exist anymore. Went on Micro Center to see if I could find a page for this thing. Micro Center has pulled all of their Deepcool products. There are no more Deepcool products in the United States. They are sanctioned. So I did pay $39.99 for this CPU cooler. You unfortunately cannot purchase it anymore. There's no warranty, nothing. So If I was within my return window, I may have looked at returning it and getting a different CPU cooler, because I mean, how weird is it to not, I mean, I don't think anything's gonna break on it, but I don't have any warranty support, nothing. So like if I needed like, you know, a replacement bracket or a replacement washer or a replacement screw for the mounting kit, can't get it from Deepcool. They can't do business with the US anymore. So CPU cooler is kind of a weird situation. Literally up until just a couple of days ago, you could buy this CPU cooler, now you cannot. So don't go looking for it, you won't find it. And then let's talk about, I'm kind of torn. I guess we'll talk about this at the GPU. So historically, the GPU's always been the weakest part of this particular build, no matter what I do. It was either an RX 480 or 590. Not the most impressive card. It was okay at the time. It was comparable, well, maybe not comparable, but I mean, I had a 1080, so the 590 wasn't a huge step down. The next iteration of this build had a GTX 970. GTX 970 is a huge step down from an RX 590 or 480. Half the VRAM and a couple generations older. So the trend kind of continues here. The GPU is going to be a GTX 1070. Now, this was an OEM GPU, which is why it has a blower. I believe it came from Dell or Alienware. I wasn't a huge fan of a couple things. The shroud just being black was one thing. And then the PCB on the back is this ugly green, and there's no backplate, because backplates weren't like hugely necessary or a big thing in the 10 and 9 series. I don't think it was till the 20 series that backplates started becoming like really, really big. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But my solutions for this was I ended up painting and decaling the shroud, and it's all set up. And then I actually reached out to a company, I believe they're called V1 Tech, and I ended up making a custom RGB backplate for this GPU. So there is no more ugly green PCB that you will see in the build. I'm kind of excited about that. This is the first time I've ever done a custom backplate. It looks really nice. I haven't tried it yet, but when I fire it up, I'm really interested to see how the RGB looks. So that is the GPU. Again, the GPU was kind of a hand-me-down as well. So it didn't technically cost me any money because it came from an existing system and somebody was just tossing their equipment. So I ended up getting this 1070. I have tested it, it works fine. I actually, when I took the shroud off, I also took the heatsink off, I repasted it, I did some service to it, I cleaned it out. The heatsink is nice and clean, the fans as clean as I can get it. It shouldn't have any problems. When I ran benchmarks on it, I did notice that it gets a little toasty, so it does have a custom fan curve as well, because it's a blower fan. But I mean, overall, I think for this system, a 1070 is not terrible. Like I said, like this thing isn't going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. I don't think it's a big issue to have a previous gen, almost now 4 previous gen model GPU in the system. This thing still has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. There are still people who use 1070s today for 1080p, which is what the resolution of this system is going to be. I don't think a GTX 1070 is going to be a big issue. I think it's fine. And it's the only one of its kind as I know of, because I painted it and put a backplate on it. So, you know, that's pretty cool too. That leaves us with only a couple things left. The next thing I guess I'll talk about is the power supply. Not the greatest power supply. I got a Thermaltake Smart Series power supply. This is a 500 watt. I don't think this system is really going to be pulling a whole lot of wattage. The GPU I think only pulls maybe like 150 watts. It only has one 8-pin on there. CPU is definitely not going to pull a whole lot. I personally have used this power supply before in previous builds for my father. It's not a great power supply, but for this system, I don't see a problem. Like my other options at this price point, and $39.95, I could have gone to Micro Center and gotten one of their house brand. I can't remember the house brand name. If I remember it, I'll put it up on the screen. They had a black and white version. White version would have been cool because it would have had white sleeved cables, but I came across this guy first before I could make a trip to Micro Center. So for $39.95, you know, it's fine. Would I rather have had like an EVGA or a Seasonic? Oh, definitely. But for 40 bucks, and I know they say don't cheap out on your power supply, but I don't think this thing's going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting either. So I think this power supply is just fine for this system. The system that the 1070 came from actually had a 430 watt power supply, so it even had a lower power supply than this. So if that's the case, I don't think we have anything really to worry about. And that leads us into what is this all going into and what kind of storage do we have. I'll go over the storage really quick. The storage is 3 different drives. I have an M.2, which is already installed on the motherboard. That is a Patriot P300. I believe it's a 512 gigabyte model. It's NVMe PCI 3, which matches up with the CPU. The Ryzen 5500 can only do PCIe 3, which is another reason why I have the GTX 1070. And it is a PCIe 3x4 for the NVMe drive. That cost me like $37. They're not very expensive, and maybe like an extra $2. I slapped a heatsink on top of it just in case. My motherboard that I use for my system has a built-in heatsink, so I did not see a heatsink on this motherboard, so I just slapped one on there. In terms of the other 2 drives, I have a 2.5-inch SSD, which is made by Samsung. That is a Samsung Pro 860, which I think is one of the last 2.5-inch SSDs that they made. It is a 256 gigabyte model. That was originally going to be the boot drive until I got the NVMe. That was a boot drive for a previous system before I went to M.2. The drive, I paid $64 for it, which is probably a lot for a 256 gigabyte 2.5-inch SSD, but the Pro 860 has pretty strong reviews and should last a pretty long time, so no matter what I do with that, I'm okay with it. And the prices that I saw on Amazon now were in the hundreds. Don't pay that price, but it's I don't think it's a bad deal at this point. It will last a long time. Granted, it's not the biggest drive. My boot drive is technically bigger. I'll still find use for that 2.5-inch. And then there is one 3.5-inch. The 3.5-inch is a 1 terabyte Seagate Barracuda, and I paid $0 for that, and that was brand new. And the story behind that is Micro Center, when it reopened, had this big special where you could get a free item as long as you basically walked into the store to check out the reopening. And so there were a couple different things. There was like a mouse pad, there was like Bluetooth headphones, and then there was a 1 terabyte hard drive, which was clearly the best value out of the whole thing. Like the headphones were $15, the mouse pad was $10, and I think at the time on sale, the hard drive was $35. So I got a $35 brand new hard drive for free. It was a bulk OEM hard drive, which means it didn't come in a box, but it was a static bag. It was brand new, and it is now going to be used in this system. It'll probably just store all the, random stuff like documents and things like that. Plenty of room. So that is all of the components, and now we can move on to what this will be living in, and I will get that right now. Oh, and it will be inside of this little system. This system is well, not a system, this is a case. The case is a Pivia Prism case, which kind of reminds me of like the Lian Li's. It's got like the side intake fans. It's got top fans, it's got an exhaust fan. You can even put fans on the bottom. It's actually got fairly decent cable management. It's big in the back. You can even do a water cooler on the side. It's pink, so it fits the bill for the aesthetics. It was only $80. It comes with 5 120mm RGB fans. The only downside about these fans is they run off of a proprietary hub that uses SATA power. so you don't get adjustable speed. It's only one speed. It does have ARGB though, so you can plug it into your motherboard just like the GPU backplate that I have. This case is okay. You do get a lot of value for the price that you pay, being $80. You get two tempered glass panels. I've already taken one off to make it easier to work on. The other one just pops off. You get 5 RGB fans. There are some letdowns. My biggest gripe with this particular case is the hard drive / solid state drive storage area is the jankiest thing I've ever seen. It's literally a sled, and instead of putting the sled somewhere down below, like near the power supply or something like that, it's suspended in the air next to the motherboard. And I mean, it shouldn't be a problem. It doesn't move that much, but the fact that it literally, there's just a peg, like there's 2 peg holes and like 2 screws, and that's it, and that holds the thing up in the air. It has vertical PSU mounting. It does not have vertical GPU mounting, but I really can't complain a whole lot for $80. The only other issue was when I bought it and I started taking the thing apart to get it ready. It looks like they put the thing together when the paint was still drying. I did have paint coming off of the case. Also, the case is not the sturdiest. It is a little flexy. You do have to be careful when you I'm not even sure if you can see this, but like the whole back is moving. You do have to be careful when you like are transporting it or moving it around. So, but for $80, I don't think I can complain a whole lot. But the whole list, so if I look at the list here, I mean, $80 for the case, $84 for the CPU, $40 for a CPU cooler you can't get anymore, $85 for a motherboard, supposedly $90 for RAM, even though I only paid $60, free graphics card, free hard drive, $64 for the SSD, $37 for the M.2, and $40 for the power supply. This is a fairly budget system that I think comes in around the $500 to $600 range, and should probably handle the 1080p games that I'm going to be building it for pretty decently. But that is the system. Once I get it together, we can do some benchmarks, but let's go ahead and we'll start building this bad boy, and or I guess bad girl, I don't know. But we'll start building this thing and see how it comes together and how it looks once it's done. Alright, so here is the completed build. The only thing that I had trouble with, and you probably saw in the little time lapse, was the graphics card backplate. The RGB connector is right below the graphics card, and I just had a hard time getting it to fit properly, so that took a little bit of time. Outside of that, things like cable management was easy. There's a lot of room behind the case. I just kind of turned everything into like one big cable. And I could probably cable manage better up here, especially near this intake fan. I might do that just to make it look a little bit nicer. But outside of that, this was a fairly simple build for me. In terms of the colors, I do like the white and pink. Everything looks pretty cool and meshes together really well. The backplate and the GPU don't match great, but that's because the backplate came after I painted the GPU, and that was also the first thing I did, so it doesn't quite match the rest of the interior of it as well, or the case, but I mean, it's still got that pink and white theme going on, so I think that looks okay. I have not fired this up yet, so I am going to fire it up, see what the RGB looks like, and then we can go from there. And that's not bad, actually. It might look a little cloudy. That's because I still have the tempered glass screen on there. I haven't pulled off the plastic, but everything looks pretty good. The fans, unfortunately, I don't think actually change color. I just think they stay this because I took the RGB switch and I turned it into a reset switch instead. But that's okay. Everything else is also in rainbow mode, albeit it's a little bit slower. That's fine. Everything is RGB, so it all kind of comes together. So overall, I don't think this looks that bad. That's a pretty nice little build here. The only other thing that I have to do for this build is just to do some basic benchmarks, and I'm looking at doing Cinebench, R23, Firestrike, Time Spy, things like that. I will post the benchmark results after I do them, but that's really about it. I'm pretty pleased with how this has turned out, so I'll go ahead and post the benchmarks next, and then we can wrap this up. And those were the benchmarks for this system. Now, it probably is underperforming a little bit. It's probably below average a little bit. That's most likely the decisions that I made to build this system using a motherboard that doesn't have PBO, but instead only can do the DDR4 XMP profile. And I found out undervolt the CPU, which I did both. I put the DDR2666 XMP profile in there, and I did an undervolt of -20 in the offset. That did help the CPU stay cooler, and I believe it only used at maximum about 45 watts according to core temp. So that's not bad. The other issue, the RAM being 2666, not the fastest RAM. I know Ryzen CPUs, I believe, like 3200, but since I already had the RAM, I didn't feel like I needed to go out and buy another set of RAM. It may have hurt the performance a little bit, I don't know how much, but it probably hurt it. And then the third issue is the GPU. It is a GTX 1070, moreover it is a Dell or Alienware OEM GTX 1070. I did some research on those cards. Apparently they don't perform as well as other cards, so if you notice the scores being a little bit lower, especially in the graphics department, that might be why compared to other 1070s. It's a blower card, so it's stock reference speeds probably, but I've been told even the founder cards do better than these OEM Dell Alienware GPUs. But again, I got it for free. I can't really complain. So those are probably the biggest limiting factors for it. But I don't think that's going to be a big issue. The system's not going to be doing a lot of AAA titles. The main purpose of this thing is actually going to be like going on the internet, doing office work for you know, classes and stuff like that. And then the games that it does play are not going to be very demanding games. It's going to be like Star Wars The Old Republic or World of Tanks Blitz. I don't know if there's even any other games that are going to go on this system, but I have it set up with space just in case it does happen. But I think overall, I think this is an okay build, especially at the budget that I hit, which is like $500 to $550. I probably could have gone lower if I didn't stick with this pink and white theme. I know the CPU coolers would have been way less expensive. I could have gone with a Thermalright, which is much less expensive than the Deep Cool. And motherboards generally are less expensive when you get black motherboard PCBs versus white or other colors. The case, I think the case is an okay value. The black or white in this company's catalog were both $79.99, so I couldn't have gained any sort of value there. And I think this is an okay value because you get 5 RGB fans included in the case, so you know, it's hard to knock that case. Power supply, maybe I could have gone with the Micro Center one. I don't know, but I think the motherboard and the CPU cooler definitely, and I don't know. I can't think of anything else. I mean, $500 to $550 is an okay budget, I think, especially for a non-standard color build of pink and white. So I'm happy with everything. It should serve its purpose very well. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I might do a video on my personal build that I have, which is the blue computer that's been in the background. I won't do a build video, obviously, but I might do some benchmarks and stuff like that just to see what a 5700X and a RTX 3070 can do. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until I see you in the next one, take it easy. Bye-bye.